Silent here. Have you ever watched a show, TV, movie, or anime that people said was just awesome, but it never really made the news? Sure, I have. Happens all the time. In fact, I just watched Baccano, solely based on a few reviewers saying it was amazing. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Now, I'm not the type to push on a bandwagon. Hell, I think Mad Men is the best show of all time, and yet it barely gets any real attention. But sometimes, a show doesn't get any attention because it doesn't deserve it. Now, Baccano starts off with a news reporter of some kind asking his assistant what is the best way to tell the story of Baccano. Now, this is a simple plot device meant to explain to the audience in a blatant way, hey, this is confusing, but it's okay. It will all make sense later. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it makes a massive mistake. It tries too hard. Baccano just tries too goddamn hard. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's simple. This show tried too hard to be too cool and failed overall because of it. Baccano tries to weave three competing stories into one cohesive narrative. Now, this has been done before, and it's not actually that hard to do. You see, you take three characters, you follow them in their stories, and you weave them together as the characters meet up and interact, and shit goes down when they're all together. Game of Thrones is a perfect example of this. You have a bunch of characters that are very separated that tell very, very separate stories, although for the most part all around the same timeline, and puts them together, they meet each other, and it weaves it all together. However, Baccano is just too cool to do with this method. It's too cool for this method. No. Baccano instead shows us bits and pieces of the story out of order in an attempt to make the end the beginning and the beginning the middle. And it does this by cutting constantly. The show cuts from one timeline, from one actual year to another, at least 4 to 5 times every goddamn episode for basically no reason. And unfortunately, this isn't the largest sin the show makes. In fact, the greatest sin of Baccano is its inability to identify and focus on the actual interesting storyline of the entire show, the immortal alchemist and a search for eternal life. There are 3 competing plots in the story: a train robbery, a mafia war, and immortal alchemists duking it out. However, there are so many goddamn characters that the mafia war is fucking meaningless. And the way the story is told is so confusing that this plot line is entirely skippable. Now, why? Because the story that underlines this whole tale, the story that underlies the entire show, is the search for immortality by a bunch of alchemists. And this is only explained at episode 7 as a kind of filler episode. So in other words, episode 1 is just a thing that's shoving down the audience's throat how confusing this story is going to be and that it's going to be okay. And episodes 2 through 6 are a fucking joke because none of it makes any sense. And once again, this show is just too cool. You see, if episode 7 was the first episode rather than the wasted time shoving this coolness down the audience's throat, this show would have made a lot more sense and been a lot more interesting. The characters would have been easier to follow, and this whole shit wouldn't be so crap. Now, Baccano is incredibly violent, which I happen to love, and the animation does do a wonderful job of showing this. Hands down, this animation quality is very, very good. However, the violence in the show feels incredibly meaningless for 2 obvious reasons. Number 1, motherfuckers can't die. If somebody gets shot in the fucking head, and you know they're just going to survive because they can't die and they're going to essentially regenerate, there's no fucking point to the violence, and it means nothing. And number 2, there's just way too fucking much of it. The audience never really fears for the death of the important characters, because all of them are fucking immortal, whether you know it or not. They fucking are, I'm telling you right now. And when they do die, if they are immortal, there's no real surprise. Because so many people die around all the immortals anyways, that when they do die, it's kind of like, look, another death. I mean, look at the way Game of Thrones handles death. A lot of random people are killed, but they're meaningless. You understand the setting is a violent setting. You understand the setting of Baccano is a violent setting. However, when the characters that are important die, it's meaningful because you know they're fucking dead. Now, yes, there is some resurrection in a show like Game of Thrones. Like, there's Catelyn Stark, it's not in the show, it's in the books. There's Jon Snow. However, part of that is it's part of the drama of the show. Not knowing, you don't know if they're just going to resurrect you. You might have an idea, but it's not like, oh wow, every single one of these characters are going to resurrect no matter what the fuck happens. So you actually, there's actual suspense in it. Now, there are a lot of interesting characters in the show, specifically Lad, Rail Tracer, Jacuzzi, and Sez. However, they are so over the goddamn top that they are more caricatures than anything else. The annoying ass duo of Annoying Town, whatever the fuck their names are, I don't care, are definitively not funny. I laughed twice in this entire show. One time because it was unexpected. There was a joke that was completely unexpected, and I had no idea what was happening. And number two, because there was so much violence in this one scene that the character was so over the top. I actually laughed because it was so ridiculous. This show is not funny. What is interesting about this show, what makes this show attractive, is not its funniness. There's not funny. Now, these two characters are there for comic relief, but all they do is pull you out of the show and make it incredibly apparent that you are watching an anime. Anytime I was trying to actually get into the show and they fucking showed up in a scene, I immediately knew I was watching an anime. I immediately was taken completely out of the scene because they are not funny characters. They are just weird and obnoxious. There's a fucking difference. See any anime that actually is violent and does comic relief well. Seriously. See, Baccano is set in the early 1930s in America, a time of the Great Depression and abject poverty. However, the show makes no attempt whatsoever to build in the setting, and the American-esque faces of the characters only makes them more similar and difficult to tell apart. Insert tattoos and ridiculous character artwork here. Because, it's realistic in the sense we don't have pink fucking hair, but instead of pink fucking hair and regular everything else, we get crazy characters that are over the top, that are caricatures of themselves, that are so far gone they're past even fucking tropes, and it makes the show ridiculous. And the plot holes, oh my god, the plot holes. Why the fuck is Huey important? He's in like 2 fucking scenes. Why the fuck is Sylvie important? She's in 1 episode. Now maybe she's important because one of the main characters has a regret over the death of his brother that is, in a way, I'm not trying to avoid spoiler, is in some way related to her, not like blood related, like there's the death is some in relation to her, but she's never brought up again. She's never described again. She's never in any of the fucking scenes. There's no fucking twist. Holy shit, Sylvie's here and she's fucking some shit up. No, there's none of that. She shows up for 1 fucking episode, gives you some melodrama, and pieces the fuck out. She's not important at all. Why is she fucking in there? Who the fuck is the demon that gives everyone eternal power? And what is his relationship to Huey? Like, he just shows up and he's like, I'll be watching you. And you never see him again. Huey never mentions him again. And there's nothing else about him. It is utterly important. See, this show has 13 episodes to tell something that should have taken 24 to 26 episodes. But the thing that frustrates me is that it wastes so much time. It really fucking does. It wastes so much time trying to say, oh my god, this character is obnoxious. Oh my god, this character is a crybaby. Oh my god, this character kills people. We only need about 30 seconds of a scene to know this dude kills people. This dude's a crybaby. Move the fuck on and get on with the plot. If there had been more of it, if there had been more story, rather than more focus on caricatures and more focus on, oh my god, the characters are being the characters, this show might have been good. And if the show focused on characters, rather than focusing on timelines and plot lines, we would have gotten a much more clear plot that made way more sense, that was way more interesting, easier to follow. And what is the important shit on the train that the train is carrying that the senator talks about? He talks about in like 1 fucking scene. He's in like 2 scenes. One, he's like, oh my god, I'm the senator. One, he's like, holy fucking shit, there's something on the train, and if my wife and daughter die, that's their fate, and that's it. I've fucking never seen him again. Now maybe I'm just lit and I missed a scene, but I didn't see that. I didn't see it again. And why the fuck is the senator's wife and daughter at all important? Why? There's nothing they fucking do that is important in any fucking way. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. See, look, I understand the appeal of this show. It's fast-paced. It's American-esque. It has a unique premise. But I'm sorry, that doesn't forgive it its faults. It's different, sure, and it's different than a lot of anime, and in that way it's kind of interesting. But different does not equal good. Interesting does not equal good. And that is the trap the developers of Baccano fell into. They thought that interesting and different meant good. It's not. So pros and cons. Let's shift gears here. The show had great animation. So pros. Great animation. Had solid music. Solid voice acting. At least when I listen to the sub, I don't watch any anime dubbed ever unless they're like Toonami, which means that they're like super licensed and shit. I don't know. Subbed all the way. I'm a sub purist, whatever. And the show had a really, really fast pace that kind of made the show different, added to its kind of premise and uniqueness. So cons. As I've been over, show had terrible character explanation. You barely knew who the fuck characters were half the time. And half the time you knew them by like their fake nicknames, like Rail Tracer. I have no idea what the fuck his name, like Vino, I think. Like the characters were really hard to tell apart unless they were covered in blood or killing people, and the show had really awkward development of the characters. And rather than trying to explain motivations, because explaining motivations ruined the whole different plot cutting stuff, and it would make the show essentially ruined its premise, they instead got this awkward caricature kind of development where it's like the characters are being the characters, woo, development. The show had awful comic relief that wasn't even comic relief. It wasn't funny. The show should have been a serious show. It should have fully dug into serious and violent, and the comic relief sucked and was pointless. The show had a complete lack of focus on what was actually important and the important plot lines and the important characters. And finally, an overwhelming number of plot holes. So, to sum it all up, the show is interesting. If you like fast-paced craziness, if you like blood, violence, gore, and shit that's all over the place, then you will like this show. If you don't like those things, now I liked violence. I think it's interesting. I like violence in shows. I think it has a lot of effect. But if you don't like any of those things, if you would like a show that's a little more slow-paced, if you don't like violence in your shows, if you want character motivations and character development to be fully laid out before the action takes place, or at least you want to understand what's going on while action is going on, this is not the show for you. So I'm going to give this show an overall rating of meh, which is 4 out of 10. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. You want to comment below what you thought of the show, if you've seen it, if you thought it was really good, really, really bad, disagree on any of these points, feel free to comment below. I hope you guys enjoyed.